Welcome to the most fascinating, least interesting MotoGP season of all time. And of course, welcome back to Motorsport 101. How else would you describe a Marc Marquez dick flattening where everything else ended up a bit weird? Hi, I'm Dre Harrison. Welcome to episode 632 of Motorsport 101. Glad you could join us. I'm your friend and neighborhood host as ever. And welcome to the second of our major series season reviews, this time for MotoGP on two wheels. And boy, have we got a lot to get through here. Again, 5 manufacturers, a whole lot of mess, ownership futures, politics, Pecco Bagnaia, Joan Mir rants, you name it, you're going to get it over the next couple of hours. Believe me, we're going to tick off everything here over the next couple of hours or so. So let's get right into it. Joining me, as always, is Mr. Cameron Buckley. Hello, sir.
Hello. You know, that tagline when entering the show, that could really just describe any year ending in 2000 and something teen.
True.
But it's been a little bit. It's been a little bit. First championship since 2019, and, well, it was about as exciting as that one. He came, he saw, he conquered, and then he got broken a little bit.
Yeah, that can happen sometimes. Hello, RJ, how's it going, man?
It's been a while since we had our last season review of 2025, because remember, the IndyCar season is nice and healthy and long, and Formula One and MotoGP off seasons are just short and frantic. But we made it. We made it to the end of the Our Bikes Season 1 saga. This anime has had... I don't know what it's got.
Couple ups, couple downs.
It was animated about as well as season 3 of One Punch Man. If you know, you know. But we will cover all of that, including Yamaha, of course, KTM, Aprilia, Honda, and the Japanese Cup, the Ducati, and the future of the sport itself. Also, we've got to mention as well, happy 500th appearance on this podcast, Mr. RJ O'Connell.
Wait, when did that happen? Oh, shit.
500. 500.
It's a great honor for me that y'all put up with me for so long, and that this somehow hasn't completely torched my professional reputation somehow. I don't know, man. Thanks.
We're just not trying hard enough. You hear that, Drake?
Yeah. We get the hammers. We'll settle this one way or another.
Get the boiling pot.
Yes, because Yamaha are about to be boiled. Places you can find us real quick before we get into this. YouTube.com/Motorsport101, Facebook.com/Motorsport101, Twitter at Motorsport_101. You can follow us on Blue Sky at Dre Harrison, RJ O'Connell, and cbuckley917.bsky.social. Highlights of the show on Instagram, Motorsport101pod, and our TikTok account, M101_podcast. Follow us there for all the highlights of the show as well, on video as well as audio. Our website, Motorsport101, where you can get, or motorsport101.com, I should say, where you can already have my written review and thoughts on everything that happened across MotoGP this year and beyond. And a full review of Qatar if you want to see me rant at how shit McLaren was. So that's always fun. And if you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon. Patreon.com/Motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of our content. You upgrade to the $10 tier to listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, as Raptor, as Kira, Jason, and others are all doing so right now. Thank you very much for listening in and for your ongoing support. Right. Number 2, Chapter 2 of our 2025 season reviews. Let's talk of MotoGP 2025. Okay,
here we go.
General rule of thumb for you guys who are new here, because every podcast is somebody's first, as I always say. We tend to do this in reverse championship order. We've gone by manufacturers on this occasion. And so bottom of the board will be Yamaha, then Honda, and then, of course, we'll work our way up to Ducati at the top. Fun! So We'll tackle Yamaha first. We'll get their team results out of the way, and we'll talk about their general seasons, years, riders, all of that good stuff, and some key points per manufacturer, and we'll move on to the next one. Right. So, Yamaha first. They were 5th in the Manufacturers' Championship, 247 points. I think that's about 30% of the maximum, so they'll be in Tier D for next year. The only Tier D manufacturer still left in the sport, funnily enough. More on that later. The Pramacs were the worst team in MotoGP this year. Jack Miller was 17th in the standings. Miguel Oliveira was 20th. Only one top 5 all year long on that Pramac team. Fabio Quartararto was a bit better. The second place in Jerez. 5 pole positions on the year. 13 times in the top 10. He was 9th in the standings. His teammate Alex Rins, not so great. 19th in points. Best finish of 7th. Well, I'll start with you, RJ. I mean, if nothing else, they're definitely a better last, even though they were 4th last year.
Yeah, they're a better last. Honda certainly jumped them in the queue, but they did have their flashes. How did Fabio Quartararo get 5 pole positions out of this bike?
Because over one lap, when the stars were aligned, the planets were aligned, Mercury was, I don't know, in whatever Mercury's in. Everything cosmically was just so. It was really freaking fast over one lap with Fabio Quartararo at the helm. And
That's
never
so
at any other time.
Right.
Which, of course, is why, Yamaha is doing their best to try and keep Fabio Quartararo on the books for the long-term future. The switch to the V4 is going to be a big part of that for next year.
Yes, the bike we're talking about now, is the last inline 4 Grand Prix motorcycle, at least for now. The end of an era. A weapon that Yamaha used to devastating effect for a very long time, but due to the advent of spec electronics, ride height devices, aerodynamics, even more aerodynamics, and ground effects and aerodynamics, and then some more, it's been more or less made obsolete.
Lynn Jarvis won 8 championships as team boss of that team.
Yep. The bike that made people like Jorge Lorenzo, the bike that brought Valentino Rossi most of his championships. It's over. And for good reason. Every single time they got to a straight, every other bike on the grid would flutter away into the distance.
They were still coughing up anywhere between 5 and 10 kilometers per hour in a straight line. They were always bottom of the speed traps without fail. Every weekend. And they weren't fast enough elsewhere to make up the difference on the track. As you said, Cam, specifically in Fabio's hands, if they got exactly the right conditions, they were still very quick over a single lap. The speed of this bike is not the issue. There certainly is some here to unlock. But if you knock Yamaha slightly out of its performance window, it would struggle.
Implode.
Yeah, they would just... I mean, let's put it this way. Fabio Quartararo was the 3rd best qualifier in MotoGP this year. He had 5 pole positions. He had an average start, I want to say, of about 5. His average
How many of those lasted to turn 1?
Well, I was going to say, his average finish was 10.8. Like, he on average would lose 6 places per start from where he starts on the grid. That is a damning indictment of where Yamaha is in terms of race trim.
Yeah, they have raw pace in the bike when everything is just right, but the bike had little to no race ability. The only race that they ever looked like winning this year was Silverstone, where he could maintain, and other bikes had issues dealing with the surface in Silverstone. #canceled.
Mm-hmm.
And it all came to naught because Yamaha also had the least reliable ride height device on the entire grid. His stuck open, collapsed the chassis of the bike, and cost him Yamaha's only real shot at topping the podium this year. Now, you notice we're talking a lot about Fabio Quartararo and the known brilliance and excellence of him, because That's all there really was to talk about from an excellence perspective at Yamaha.
Yeah, because these other three bikes really were more representative of the general quality of the bike. We were so worried that Franco Morbidelli was never going to be the same rider after his leg injury that we kind of forgot that Alex Rins hasn't been the same rider since his devastating leg injury. Jack Miller did not ride like a DEI hire for English native speakers for the first part of the season. It then tailed off, but you know what? It wasn't as bad as Miguel Oliveira having another injury-laden season, his last in MotoGP. He'll give way to Toprak Razgatlioglu, the reigning World Superbikes Championship, in a move that we kind of thought was never going to happen. We just kind of thought it was
Especially not with Yamaha.
Kanan, here it goes type moment. And it actually did.
Especially with Yamaha, given the way that Toprak and Yamaha ended around that MotoGP test. But yeah, Miguel Oliveira, great MotoGP rider, went out extremely sad. We talked about it on the Portuguese Grand Prix review. Alex Rins, still walking with a heavy limp after the Honda took its pound of flesh for daring to be ridden in a winning manner 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And Jack Miller, he was fine.
At moments.
He was fine.
He was perfectly fine.
Better than what I expected.
Yeah. You were kind of expecting him to ride so bad they were going to move him off to World Superbikes mid-season.
And Ducati were banging on the door to bring him in for their World Superbike team as an Alvaro Bautista replacement, but Jack begged and pleaded to stay up with Pramac. They were like, make a call already, or else I'm just going to end up leaving. And Pramac coughed up a seat for him in the end, alongside Toprak. I mean, you guys said it in one pretty much. Miguel Oliveira went out very sad. A quality rider that was always in the wrong place at the wrong time, quite frankly. Rins has never been the same guy post-leg break. He's just seemingly there. He doesn't crash very often, but he's just slow at this point. Most of Alex Rins' highlights over the course of the year was him shithousing away into Q2 by towing off somebody else.
I was more
sad,
thinking...
really.
I was more thinking him bolting on the softs for a bit of fun. A couple races in the end, it was like, oh man, he's knocking on the door of the top 5, and then he just fell like a stone as soon as the tires went off. That was kind of that Mandalay. It's the best he looked all year.
These are the risks you can take when you have nothing else to play for.
Yeah, and it feels like that is pretty much Yamaha. They are limping, wounded, and bleeding out of these regulations. They, perhaps even more than the next manufacturer we will talk about, everything about what the Yamaha was historically predicated on was made obsolete by the technology war we've seen in the last 4 years in MotoGP. They are now, I think, resoundingly the biggest victims of it. And in their attempts to try and match that, they've brought a V4. They did test it. It was okay, but still very much early testing phases early on when they did run it. But really, that V4 less becomes their saving grace, and it more becomes their preview into the 850 regulations for next year for 2 years from now. Because that's what next year really has to be for them. They are not in contention for even podiums on a regular basis, unless Fabio is particularly feeling it.
And Fabio doesn't like this V4. He's made it very clear he doesn't like this V4 right now.
There's a lot of the same problems in the dynamics of the bike. They still lack rear grip.
This screams 2022 Honda scenario where all your eggs are in the Fabio basket. You don't know, if you're going to be able to keep him for much longer, because Fabio is stressed that my time is running out. I can't afford to wait around for another reboot in 2 years' time. And from what I saw from Augusto Fernandez in this V4, I wasn't exactly impressed. And if that doesn't work and you lose Fabio, where does this factory go from here? Because
it leaves you about the same place that Honda was when they lost Marc Marquez, and that's not really a good place.
Because you've got like Jack Miller, who's okay but not great, Toprak, who is an experiment at this point, and Alex Rins, who by all accounts is cooked.
Yeah, and Rins is a huge shame because when Rins was healthy and Rins wasn't crashing, Rins is as good as anybody on this grid. But we've not seen that in about a year and a half now. And somehow I don't expect it to get any better. Like I said, everything is developed through next year. Your V4 is your base for the 850. See what you get with the 850. The problem is that Fabio's contract is up at the end of next year.
Yep.
So, in private testing, which they'll get plenty of as the only manufacturer remaining in Tier D concessions, that 850's got to prove something to him.
Yeah. It could be.
Question is, before we move on to Honda as well, real quick. What do we think Toprak will be next year?
Interesting.
That's a really good question, because we know he's good.
I still think he's going to go in for a full kill qualifying lap, try to top rack brake on a Michelin front tire, and that bike is going to send him into another country. Because the Michelin front is not built for top rack.
There's never been a guy that's come out of World Superbikes in their prime that's as MotoGP ready as this dude in a long while. We're going to find out really quickly if that pipeline is still viable now and in future generations.
Tell you what.
He is, yeah.
Raw talent and ability ain't the problem.
He is quite possibly the greatest World Superbike rider of all time. And he's coming in to a team that needs a lot of development. He's got talent, that's never been the issue, but can he get used to the Michelins for a year before going back to the Pirellis for 2027? What is this first year going to look like? I just don't know. If anyone can adapt, it's him. The people in the camp have been very positive about him, but the World Superbike MotoGP transition has never gone well. It's always come with hurdles. These bikes are more
different than they've ever been. At least for a year. These bikes are far more alien and tech-heavy than what Ben Spies famously, and he'd talk your ear off about it, struggled with when he moved over to Yamaha, because MotoGP bikes don't flex.
Yeah.
They don't flex. They're stiff. They're unforgiving things. And what I will say about Toprak, there will be no better judge on this planet Earth of how a bike should brake on its front tire when they put the Pirellis on.
Yeah, he's going to be going like this. The rear's going to be up in the air like that, like a bucking Bronco.
They're looking like Danny Pedrosa at Motegi 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
You know the one.
Speaking of Danny Pedrosa in the glory days, I mean, Honda proved that there is a way up from rock bottom. They were 285 points. Tier C for next year, which I don't know if that's real productive.
Precisely on the point.
They got a win. Johan Zarco, 12th in the championship, 148 points. Got the win. 2 podiums, 7 top 10s. We don't need to talk about Somcat Chantra. It's sad for everybody.
There's nothing to say.
And the factory team, Luca Marini, 13th in points, 14 top 10s. Johan Mir, 15th in points, 2 podiums, 6 top 10s. All of the factory Honda team's podiums. This was by far the most improved factory on the grid, up 24% on the maximum of 2024. And as you pointed out, got up to Tier C by 1 point. Does that help them on their rebuild?
No, technically, but given the general reaction in the Honda camp when Marini came through with that magical, exactly on the nose P7 in Valencia, there was warm cheers and hugs. Because if you're an engineer, why would you want to do overtime?
And Honda has been. And I would sum them up as, hey, not too bad. That was Honda's year this year. They have hurled infinite amounts of money, resources, people, etc. into this hole to try and step out of the nadir they found themselves in. Their worst ever streak. in their history as a Grand Prix motorcycle entity. And they started off a year a little better than last year, and got a lot better through the year. Pretty much everything they brought worked this year. Didn't work for everyone. A big chassis change in the middle of the year kind of wrecked Johan Zarco's second half. But it also revitalized the hell out of the factory team.
Yeah, this was a good year for Honda. I know a lot of people have talked about nominating them in our most improved award for the Motorsport 101 awards at the end of the year, because at the end of the day, they were the most improved factory. They were at 10% of the maximum last year. They're at 35 now. So that's a 25% increase. It's a much bigger slice of the potential pie. And you could see by watching them, this is a better Honda team than it was last year. Johan Zarco, the first 8 rounds of this year were terrific. I still believe he had the moment of the year at Le Mans with that magical win, the first French Premier Class home winner in 71 years.
It don't get better than that, man.
It doesn't get better than that. He had to be perfect. And was.
Yeah, he was perfect on the day. There was not a dry eye in the house to win arguably the biggest MotoGP race of the year now at Le Mans.
Had mom and dad at the track with him.
They never go to the races with him. So to see that with their own eyes, it was a genuinely powerful, emotional moment for one of the sport's genuinely well-liked veterans, and it was cool as shit. It's a shame the back half was as messy as it was, because he was clearly quick, but again, the development just seemed to fuck him up as the year went on for Zarco, because on raw speed, he was their best rider, but that fell off quick in the back half. First 7 weekends, Zarco had 97 points. The other 15, he had 51.
Yeah. Kind of tale of two seasons. Still had some good odds and ends in the second half of the season, but a bit more of it was crashing. A couple of those, especially down the stretch, were downright stupid. That one he had with Pecco, what was it? Either Valencia. Last round or 2 rounds? It was Valencia. Was just
dreadful.
Incredibly dumb. And not a product of the bike, just a genuine rider error. But
yeah, just not good.
Honda cut their gap to the front of the field by like over 50%.
Yeah. We saw the little graph that the factory team put out by the end of the year. Huge progress. No doubt about that. I'll quickly get the Somkiat Chantra talk out of the way. I feel bad for the dude. It's a rare case where I just say that a MotoGP rider is genuinely out of his depth. And just completely not at the level needed to be in MotoGP. It's not his fault. He took the opportunity on because Honda originally wanted Ayagura. Agura went to Aprilia instead with Trackhouse. We'll talk about them later. But just sadly, just not up to standard, unfortunately. He'll be heading off to Honda's World Superbike team next year alongside Captain Glaze himself, Jake Dixon. Good luck with that. Greg Haynes and James Tozen in the commentary box. The factory team is a more interesting case. 2 very different type of riders here. Because
including one style that just seems antithetical to Johan Mir's peak. Remember when Johan Mir was the definition of rock-solid consistency, not very high peaks, but the floor is just, the ceiling is the roof, etc.? Yeah, yes. That's changed.
Yes, Johan Mir, get the fuck off my motorcycle.
To do what?
I don't know. Go put on one of Craig Sager's suits.
So take this suit.
He will look better.
Do you want him on a better bike then?
You can put on one of those suits and he will look better than he did for the majority of this year. Johan Mir,
100% of the factory team's podiums.
Correct. Because what was he doing when he wasn't getting those podiums?
He had 19 DNFs this year, 13 of them in Grand Prix.
A couple of them into the side of his teammate.
Yeah. Just not acceptable. Like,
it's the frustrating thing is that like he was consistently as fast as Zarco, if not faster.
Yeah.
And there was a couple races in Motegi. He looked like Marc Marquez wrangling that thing around the track.
Oh, yeah.
Tying the bike into knots, launching it into braking zones, and keeping it fast. Like, dancing right on the precipice of disaster. The problem is that he's usually on the wrong side of that. And nowhere was that more prevalent than in Valencia in the sprint, with Honda needing a handful of points to get out of concessions. He goes for a negative percentage dive bomb, tucks the front, and wipes out Luca Marini. And that is what got me off the mirror wagon. He has a couple podiums from this year. You now wonder, is he your guy to lead you into race win contention when the Honda's actually ready to win?
Because this is the situation. If anything, Honda might have overcommitted for their future already. Because the thing is, right, Johann Zarco was given a 2-year extension by Honda in the back end of the year. Fairly deserved, right? Marini was given a 1-year deal. So Marini is again a free agent at the end of next season, right? And I'd argue he's their best rider right now. Oh, super consistent the whole way through. Somehow got better after a punctured lung. Weird how these years work out.
The pain makes him stronger.
He was better.
And at LCR, you've just brought in the Moto2 world champion in Diogo Moreira, and he's been brought in on a 3-year... Yeah, and he's been brought in on a 3-year deal. Like, Honda have got a lot of faith in this dude because they've tied him down for the whole next contract cycle. 3 years. He was given the Brad Binder contract.
Do you develop him into your next leader? Is that what that contract is? Because that's what it feels like.
It's certainly a big long-term commitment because you don't get 3-year deals very often in MotoGP. And the thing as well with that is that if the thing is, I'll get to this in a minute because we'll talk about Jorge Martin later, right? But Honda were more than prepared to make a bid for Jorge Martin this year. That says to me that I think Alberto Puig still wants to take a big splash on a rider if they become available, right? That's a statement of intent, right? Honda was not going to mess with Martin given the legal parameters of that, but he was obviously making it more than public knowledge that they were prepared to sign him if he became available, right? Have you already overcommitted if you've got Moreira and Zarco tied down to long-term deals and Marini's expendable and potentially because he's got 1 year left and then you've got Mir who's a free agent next year? Right now, as it stands, Mir's the vulnerable one, which is a weird thing to say.
Yeah, because Marini, I mean, to talk about Luca Marini for a minute, again, bastion of consistency, only this year he was actually pretty fast.
He had the 6th best average finish in Grand Prix of any rider on the grid. Sub 10. That's hard to do in this sport, given DNFs and how frequently crashes. He only crashed twice all year. One of them wasn't his fault.
Yep. Yeah. Dead consistent.
The safest pair of hands in MotoGP.
And he was the reason for Honda's championship position. He got them over the line out of the concessions. Because, again, Mir left got at least 40, 50 points on the table, just throwing the bike up the road. Because a few of them were not his fault. A few of them were him being run into because for the first half of the year, the Honda was so slow in a straight line because they had the engine turned down that he was just literally getting run into on the end of straights.
There were three Grand Prix in a row. I want to say it was Germany, Assen, Brno, where he was taken out by 3 different riders in Grand Prix. I think it was Agura in Germany, and then it was Aldeguer in Assen, and then Alex Marquez in Brno, where it was just he got wiped out through no fault of his own, 3 rounds running. So yeah, I don't necessarily want to say that every single crash was Mir's fault, but the vast majority were. And if you are going to be a contending factory again, you can't be 46 points behind Luca Marini, and you cannot be crashing 60% of the time. That's just unacceptable, no matter how you cut it. So they Mir needs to get his house in order. I'm not saying it's all on him. That would be unfair to say it's all on him. But no matter how you slice it, he's got to clean up the attrition rate.
Yeah, I still believe in the higher ceiling than he has. I do.
And you should.
Marini had a good season. I still need to see more before I'm ready to say that this is the guy that can be the leader of a competitive Castrol Honda HRC team, because I'm not quite there yet.
And that's also probably, and that's fair to say. Marini is a good rider. He is not a great rider. And Honda, if they want to win a title, need at some point to hire a great rider. And we need to know what
do we say about Carlos Sainz last episode? Be a great number 2 and a championship contending team.
Right. And that is a great guy to have when you're Honda right now. If Honda are in Tier B, or if Honda suddenly can become a team that wins 3 or 4 races over a season, is that your guy? I'm not fully convinced on that yet.
They can afford to be a little bit patient with Morera at this stage. There's no rush to bring him up to the factory team just yet. They could go out and sign that free agent if they suddenly decide they've lost faith in Johan Mir or Luca Marini or both.
And everyone has a bit of a leash here, because remember, we're still talking about the second worst manufacturer in MotoGP. They were just a whole lot better than they were last year, where they were so bad their partner of over 25 years left.
Look, they're not so depressed that they just don't do anything, but you are still having to remind them to clean up after themselves every now and then.
Right.
Indeed. Should we talk about KTM?
Ooh, which part do you want to talk about first? What part do you want to talk about first, Dre? Do you want to talk about the riders, the performance, or this whole ownership sitch?
Well, the thing is that there has been significant developments in that we've not had the opportunity to talk about on this podcast since the championship ended a couple of weeks ago. Now that we know a little bit more about the situation. So forgive me for the next 3 minutes while I do my best to try and explain the situation, because it is a bit of a messy one. Right. So, here's where we're at. Bajaj Auto now owns 100% of KTM. All of it. There was a clause in place when they took the majority deal that they could buy out the rest. They have taken that option, and they have bought the whole of KTM as an entity at this point, right? Cool. They have a problem. Allegedly, Bajaj walked through the door, took one look at the books, and said, and I quote, "Why are only 40% of your staff on production?" Translation, why aren't you making more bikes? And they looked at the books a bit further, and they did not like what they saw, in the sense of they want to cut KTM's overall spending down by 50%. So they want to cut it in half. That is a significant margin. They don't really want to go racing. They don't like the fact that... Oh, before I carry on, gentlemen, do you want to guess how many factory contracted riders KTM has under their books?
Without looking it up, it's 8.
Go on, Cam.
More than 10.
It's 42.
I was going to say, it's a lot. I was going to say, because it's everyone in MotoGP and testers, Moto2, Moto3.
Yeah.
Dirt biking everywhere globally.
Motocross, yeah. Across the motocross and the Dakar.
Yep, and the Dakar. Baja as well.
Yep. Once you go all in, it is 42 contracted factory riders directly on KTM's books. Bajaj, understandably, were like, this is ridiculous.
Yes.
So they want to...
are they going to build the motorcycles?
Hey, that's still a great video of Michael and Nico building an AMG engine for an SLS.
Yeah. Yeah, Bajaj have looked at the books. They're not happy. They don't really want to go racing, is the impression that we're getting here. And, well, KTM Racing, the entity that does all the R&D and all their actual bike racing, is up for sale. Remember that, it becomes important later. Enter one of KTM's partners, CF Moto. You may not have heard of CF Moto. They are the biggest biking producers now coming out of China. Because China, as we talked about on the show before, are becoming a growing force in bike development and bike building. They've poured hundreds of millions into bike manufacturing, and they're now starting to get a foothold in Europe. There's actually now a couple of CF Moto dealers in the UK, funnily enough. There's some in Italy now. There's some in Spain. So they're starting to now put themselves in European markets to try and compete against other manufacturers. They also want to go racing. Their attitude has always been, we think the best advertisement for our brand is racing. In fact, they actually unveiled their first superbike concept a couple of months ago at a motor show. V4, 990cc, 210 brake horsepower. Very in line with a lot of
great
the
way to
modern-day
wrap yourself
superbikes.
around a tree.
Yeah, exactly. Far too powerful for the road, but it's a superbike and it's there. They've already been in talks with Dorna about the possibility of racing in world superbikes in the future, and they've basically put feelers out there to Dorna, basically saying, hey, if we raced with prototypes, could you maybe cough up a couple of grid slots for us in the future? And Dorna has said, show us a concept and a plan and we'll consider it. And that's where the KTM side of things comes in, because they're already a partner of KTM. Remember Aspar? CF Moto is a direct sponsor of Aspars, and that includes David Alonso, Danny Holgado, Max Chies, big names in the juniors. So they've already got their foothold in racing as a brand and a sponsor. Fun fact, they actually tried to get the deal in to be the Moto3 supplier as well. They were knocked back at the last minute because apparently the Japanese Cup was not exactly impressed with someone coming for their market share. China's here and they're not going to go quietly. The talk is that CF Moto might spend the money to buddy up with KTM and have them build their racing machines. Racing under CF badges in the future. They're in negotiations. KTM's already got the engine. They've already fired that up in the factory as well for 2027. The new regulations. Yeah, it's public knowledge. We've all seen it. It's ready to go, basically. But the talk is that apparently CF Moto might use KTM's ready to go engineering department, and they all come together to collab, build the bikes, put them on the CF Moto's branding, and go race with them. Just one problem. They want 100 million euros for the racing department. That's a lot of cash to stump up.
How many Xboxes is that?
That is a lot of Xboxes. That's like 2 million. That's like 2 million Xboxes. So they want KTM apparently value their racing department at 100 million euros. Now, CF Moto can afford it. They turned over $2.1 billion last year. That was their revenue. So they've got revenue in hand. It's going up. The question is, do they want to spend that big 100 million euro investment to truly go racing? And that's what they're apparently negotiating with KTM on. If they're serious about a European expansion, I think 100 million's a drop in the bucket. But that's still a big commitment. So that's where KTM's ownership is. And I've barely even mentioned the fact that you got to remember, Hervé Poncharal is gone because Gunther Steiner now owns Tech 3. So
that happened.
Yeah. Hervé's gone, my man, and it makes me sad because I miss him. One of the nearly 40-year veteran of the paddock. He's been there at Tech 3 since I want to say 89. In some capacity, he's going to move back into a training role, and he probably won't be at every race going forward as Gunther Steiner and his management group now takes over. So that's the future of KTM. It's all still a little bit up in the air. Oh, and by the way, your star rider's on a contract here. That might be a problem. Should we talk about him first? Because Pedro Acosta was fantastic this season.
Yeah, I mean, he did everything but win a Grand Prix. Again, 5 podiums, 7 sprint podiums, 17 top 10s, 4th in the points with 307 of those things. Comprehensively outperforming Brad Binder, who has been the veteran staple of KTM's MotoGP program for quite some time now.
Yep. Multiple new race winners this year, and Pedro Acosta was not one of them.
How?
Because every single time we get down the stretch, the KTM does the same thing the KTM always does. Chatter and burn tires.
This is the most stagnant factory in the sport. They improved by a grand total of 1% from last year's points haul, Dre.
Virtually identical. And on the one hand, I worry a little bit because they were a bit more lopsided this year than they were in previous years. And they haven't really got I said this was the year they haven't really got an excuse. And to a degree, I kind of have to give them one, because there was somebody else in KTM's crew that looked like he was actually going to have a really good season, and then it all fell apart in Germany, and that was Maverick Vinales. I think he was having a really, really, maybe top 6 level kind of season, and then he broke off a chunk of his shoulder when he had that huge high slide in Germany.
Off of it. The top of his shoulder.
Oh, he popped the top off, dog. Don't do that.
It didn't pop, broke. You pop a shoulder, you can put it back in. His shoulder was broken. And that pretty much ended his season. When he was here, he was barely functional, and he wasn't here all that often. Which is a shame, because once he did get to grips with the bike, Maverick was Maverick by name, Maverick by nature. Very, very, very fast.
Yeah, I would say regular top 6 sitter when healthy and when the bike was in motion, clicking. He was I think he was 5th at Le Mans. He finished 2nd in the road in Qatar. That was the nearest anyone got to a Marquez win, not in a Ducati, for a good while that season. Was dropped to 14th because of the tyre pressure regulations afterwards. But he was regularly in the top 6 for the first half of the year and was very quick. Just that injury completely derailed this season. And it was a horrible injury. Like one of the nastiest high sides in MotoGP history. He was never the same after that this season. I think actually everybody underestimated just how much recovery it was going to need for him to get back up to speed. Really, he should have sat out the rest of the year in hindsight. But we just didn't know it at the time.
Yeah, he had 5 or 6, basically false starts coming back. And really, they should have seen that X-ray and gone and shut it down for the year, because it's not an injury that a rider can truly ride through. It never really got better. They did shut him down early this year to try and get that to heal. Just very, very rough, because he was the only other person besides Acosta worth a damn on a KTM this year.
Brad Binder fell off a cliff this year. Like, the qualifying was
horrendous. He got destroyed in qualifying. If nothing else, Brad Binder could throw a lap together in the past. Yeah. This year, he just couldn't generate 1 lap speed out of it. His race pace, more often than not, was actually all right. But just
classic Binder.
Over one lap, he could not get the bike to work for him. This iteration of the KTM we're in now.
I think the race and Val put it out there that back half of the year, on average, he was being out-qualified by Acosta by nearly half a second, which is just a disaster.
One of the biggest gaps on the field.
Yeah, it was rough. The race trim actually wasn't too bad, like you say, but Binder was like This is a guy that was the best non-Ducati in the championship for about 3 years in a row. Pedro has completely stolen his thunder. And so much so, KTM's blown his crew up because now he's got Phil Marin as his partner. For those who don't know, Top Rack's crew chief, who couldn't go with him to MotoGP. So he's now going to be Brad Binder's new crew chief. And apparently, the first test together was very good in Valencia. New ergonomic seat position, best feeling he's had on the bike with the Michelins in quite some time. There was a lot of optimism coming out of that camp after Valencia, so a good sign that they might be moving in the right direction. Because we know Marin, Binder is excellent.
Yeah, as fast as anyone, and we know Marin knows what he's doing because BMW looked out to lunch this year in for the first weekend, and then they got to work. Yeah. There's not a lot else to say. Like, Brad Binder just had a very anonymous season.
Yeah. And then I could probably say the same for Bastianini.
Bastianini, I don't know,
He got a podium. He got a sprint podium, 8 top 10s, but this isn't what you expect for a rider who was, I know it was on a Ducati, but a championship contender, outside championship contender, Grand Prix race winner, not all that long ago. I think he got hard done when he got pushed out of Ducati. I do.
I think he was, pound for pound, maybe the worst qualifier in MotoGP this year. Router makes a good point in our chat. No one gained more positions in race trim this year than Bastianini, because it's the same old story with Bastianini. Excellent race trim in the back half of a race was he's so good on managing his rear tyre, but he could not qualify worth a damn. His average start was 16 this year. That's just not good enough for a KTM level factory rider. It just isn't.
Well, and especially when in the modern iteration of MotoGP, track position's worth more than ever. Yeah, couldn't qualify the bike. Couldn't race the bike for the first third of a race, and then he would come on song, and then he was terrific. But it's the same thing with Bastianini every year. You can't be the best motorcycle racer in the world for the last 33% of a race.
No, you can't do it. It's not acceptable. You don't sign a man who was 4th in the championship on a Ducati last year to come 14th on a KTM. That no one signed up for that. And he needs to be better next year. Otherwise, he is going to be let go for somebody else. There's plenty of talented Moto2 dudes that I think KTM could easily take a punt on. In fact, I would go out as far as to say, if Bastianini doesn't work out, and given the partnerships in play, it wouldn't surprise me if either David Alonso or Danny Holgado is on that bike in 2027.
Oh, buddy.
If indeed
that's gotta be tough.
They are here for 2027.
At least in their current form.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Alonso, money. Holgado, money. But we've said that about...
Yeah, he really should win that championship next year.
Yeah, but we've said that about KTM Moto2 prospects before now, haven't we, coming into MotoGP? And then they blew them up.
KTM has never been afraid to blow this whole thing up, regardless of whether it works or not, if it's the right move or not for them to do. I mean, this is only just par for the course.
And that's the thing with KTM, is everything about them this year, other than the financial disasters that permeated their entire calendar year, is more of the same.
Yeah.
This bike we go somewhere, this bike works. We go somewhere, this bike doesn't. It has no rhyme or reason. There is no pattern to it. The only pattern really this year is that down the stretch, Pedro Acosta was balling out on the thing. But it still wasn't good enough to overcome even a problematic Ducati or a surging Aprilia. Because on a given weekend, Pedro Acosta may have been the best rider, but at no stage this year was he ever on a bike good enough to win.
Yeah. He's an exceptional talent. I would go as far as to say he might be the number 1 rider on the board in free agency this upcoming season. Maybe even more than Fabio, given his age. Because Acosta is still only 22. You know, and he's already, in my opinion, a top 6 rider in this sport.
Pedro Acosta is the perfect man to make your number one. If you are Yamaha, or if you are Honda, or if things get wacky at Aprilia, he is box office. He was as advertised. Still messy at times, but he's also trying to get blood from a stone. KTM just every year, it's been the same for like 5 years. The bikes change, the technology shifts, and KTM are the same. Sometimes they're best of the rest, sometimes they're kind of nowhere.
Yeah, they need to figure out a base that makes them consistent everywhere on the calendar rather than at maybe 10 rounds out of 22. Because, like I said, Acosta is now good enough where he can win. And that is a sincere compliment of his ability. He was fourth in the championship this year, and he was a deserved fourth. That I have no issue with that whatsoever.
He's half of the year, he was so much back pay.
Oh boy! Like I said,
he's going to get back pay for all the wins he's been missing up to this point.
I think he's. If Ducati want to go outside of their umbrella, that is the dude they should sign. That's your man of the future. Because that if Ducati signs him, he's a future world champion. Easy.
For sure.
Easy. He's good enough.
If I'm Honda, I'm raising whatever Ducati wants to pay him.
Truck.
Yeah,
absolutely.
If you're Honda, you're telling him what's it gonna take.
What denomination of notes would Sir like?
Gold, watches.
We'll pay you in gold, and we'll leave it under the podium.
Yen, euro, dollar, not Bitcoin.
Yeah.
A crisp $10 note.
100%. He is good enough where you can build an entire team around him. He's one of about 4 dudes I would say that about in MotoGP right now. And he's good enough in that point where KTM need to do whatever it can to keep him on board. The problem is the ownership might not let them the way things are going right now, so we'll have to wait and see. Aprilia.
Oh boy.
This is an interesting year.
Aprilia.
Aprilia, I mean, dear God, where do we start here? 418 points, 52% of points available. Best of the rest. Actually, not a million miles away from Tier B, funnily enough. About 60 points out by the time we got to the end of the season. Easily the best of the rest this year. 4 wins as a manufacturer this year. 3 from Marco Bezzecchi, 1 from Raul Fernandez, of all people. We'll talk about him in a bit. But it's hard not to be talking about Aprilia without first mentioning the Jorge Martin scandal.
I forgot that whole thing happened because, I've just been spending the whole year lamenting that Jorge Martin's been hurt the whole year.
Yes, you talk about the one being cursed in MotoGP. It ain't ever been more cursed than it was this year because, he got on the bike in preseason testing and he crashed it immediately on cold tires and injured himself.
As RJ mentioned a minute ago, you can't talk about one with Martin without talking about the other. As Cam alluded to, he had a nasty high side at the Sepang test when the preseason started. The big Sepang test is normally the first real indication of who's good and who isn't in MotoGP.
So you get the real bikes for that year.
Yeah, broke bones in his hands and ankle, his extremities. Then crashed again in training while recovering from that first set of injuries. So he missed the first 3 rounds of the 2025 season. When he was healthy again to go in Qatar, he crashed in the race there off the curbs at turn 11, and then he was run over by Fabio Di Giannantonio, punctured his lung, cracked 11 of his ribs. Very
hell of
lucky.
An image. Don't look for it.
No, very lucky to still be with us, quite frankly. Was airlifted to hospital. eventually made a full recovery, but he missed another 7 rounds in that process. Didn't come back till Brno, the last round before the summer break, really. Had a few decent results. He was 7th in that Grand Prix in Brno, was 4th at Balloton Park from 18th on the grid. There was some promise there. And just when he was starting to get bedded in properly, he had in another enormous crash at Motegi, lost his braking zone going into turn 1, wrecked himself and his teammate Marco Bezzecchi, destroyed his shoulder and collarbone, sat out for pretty much the rest of the season. He did show up to Valencia, but pulled himself halfway through the race due to the pain being a bit too much to him to take. Now, I've missed a vital part of the story out here, because somewhere in between that Sepang test and the second set of injuries, Martin was in his own head that he felt like this Aprilia was trying to kill him. So much so, he secretly travelled to Le Mans after his surgery on his ribs and after he was released from hospital, and he sits down with CEO Massimo Rivola and he says to him, I don't want to ride for you anymore. There is an injury clause in my contract that says if I am not in the top 5 of the championship after 6 rounds, which was round 7 when we got to Le Mans, I can walk at the end of this season. Rivola is like, what are you talking about? There's no such thing in this contract. And then it goes public. I was able to actually break the story at the Motorsport Network, thanks to Uriel Puigdemont and Herman Garcia, who broke the story. They did tremendous journalism work to break it. Arguably the biggest motorsport scoop of 2025, quite frankly. Martin wants to leave out of nowhere. So while Aprilia is figuring out how to race on the track with Bezzecchi as their team leader, they've also got Martin publicly saying he wants to leave. It was a scandal that dragged on all the way through the first European chunk of the season. Bez wins a race in Silverstone in between. There's even this really awkward scene where fucking Martin shows up to the Aprilia All-Stars events like everything is fine, even though he's in a legal dispute with his own factory. Eventually,
you have Alberto Puig from Honda going, we're not doing anything until everything clears legally.
Yeah, and his agent Albert Valera, Jorge Lorenzo's manager, was the one that was saying at Assen, we haven't given this up yet. We are going to take this to court if we have to. And then Dorna CEO Carmelo Espelta comes out and says, if you haven't sorted this legal dispute by the end of the season, we're not putting you on the grid next year. We're not putting a rider that's in contract limbo on the grid. We will just take the grid slot away. And Martin back down. 2 weeks later, he goes up to Brno and is like, yeah, I'm going to ride again. Cool. Problem solved. Because
the problems weren't solved because he spent most of the year injured. When he was healthy enough to ride a bike, he was obviously still nursing injuries and nowhere near Marco Bezzecchi's level, which is not what you signed the reigning world champion for. I get it.
Yep, because he is still, practically speaking, a rookie on that bike. He had no preseason testing because his preseason testing ended after 13 laps.
Right, and that's the thing that makes this just so strange, because it's messy. It goes to show you just how paranoid MotoGP riders are, because that's what this was. Martin was adamant that bike was going to kill him, and he was so sure of this, he was prepared to trigger a clause that to this day we don't know whether it was even actually in the contract, to just try and get out of this team and go to a Honda.
They go to Honda, who, again, we talked about them, really up year for them. They're still the second worst entity in MotoGP and still very far from an entity of where their budget and engineering manpower represent. And this would also have been the second messy breakup in 2 years for Jorge Martin, because he left Ducati the jaded world champion, someone who beat the factory team, beat their man Pecco Bagnaia, and yet was basically frozen out of a factory seat in favor of Marc Marquez. Now, as things played out, that freezing out was deeply justified. But 2 years in a row where Martin will have left a manufacturer on horrendous terms doesn't make anyone look good.
Arguably third because of his KTM scandal in Moto2, where he cited an injury clause there as well because he got COVID during that season. He was going to be a KTM factory rider, and then the contract got pulled.
Hey, that injured was my taste for pickles and peanut butter and iced tea.
Oh, dude.
But man, like, it's Aprilia on the surface look like a team completely reborn, that the potential of the RSGP since the major redesign a few years ago finally realized, throwing hands with Ducati, making the factory Ducatis work for it, Marco Bezzecchi returning to the upper elite of MotoGP. Yet behind the scenes, they were an extremely messy bitch.
It's a weird one because on the one hand, they had huge political mess that took half the season to figure out. But on the plus side, it's the nearest anyone has had to being a genuine rival to Ducati since 2022, in my opinion. This was a big step forward for Aprilia this year. Bez, like you said, his best year in MotoGP comfortably. 5 pole positions, 3 wins, 3 sprint wins, 6 sprint podiums, 9 in total in Grand Prix, and a comfortable 3rd in the championship in the end. He is a legit top 5 rider on the grid now, and for a good few rounds, he was the only person that could give Marc Marquez something to think about. The back half of the year was defined by Marco Bezzecchi being an antagonist.
In more ways than one, unfortunately, because for all of the speed, and he was hellaciously fast, could put the bike on pole position practically at will once Marc was injured. And because the Aprilia is less of a specialist bike now, it is more of an all-around tool where they've married the front end it's always had to now a very good rear end on the bike, to an engine that's not quite there, but it's good enough.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's no Desmo, but it's fine.
It's good enough.
It's good enough. He also triggered a why not Bez, well, because of Bez, on a couple of occasions. Phillip Island.
Yeah, was a direct result of his Indonesia takeout of Marc Marquez.
Indonesia, where he was the fastest person that he could put 3/4 of a second a lap on everybody. Yet, because the Aprilia also doesn't have the best hole shot device in the world, it's not the Ducati off the line, especially on lower grip surfaces as well. He panicked, he lunged, he killed Marc Marquez for the year.
Yeah, season done. Second, boys. Just gotta get my laptop charger. Get in there, you bitch. Yeah, like...
Harrison!
You're muted, bro.
We can't hear you. Now we can hear background noise.
Okay.
Now we can hear Dre.
We'll edit this out. It's fine. Ba, 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 ba.
Yeah, very odd as well. I think my microphone's changed as well. For some reason, my microphone's disconnected. That's really odd. All I did was plug my charger in. But, okay, it's still uploading. It's got new tracks coming through. So
you haven't left at all.
Shake it. No, I think it will just shake itself out in post-production. Yeah. Carry on, gents. But, yeah.
Yeah. Bezzecchi had...
Bezzecchi had incredibly high points, the highest he's ever reached in MotoGP. Made Marc Marquez earn a couple of his dominant victories this year, but at the same time had really 3 or 4 rounds that were just incredibly messy for no other reason than him losing his composure. When he had the pace to, if not win, at least podium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, big step in the right direction where that's concerned. Again, back half of the year was Bez's year, quite frankly. He was the only person that Marquez was good. Shout out to Raul Fernandez as well over at Trackhouse.
How about that? He heard y'all wanting to get him fired, and look what he did, but give us his first Grand Prix win and his best season in MotoGP to date.
Top 10 in the standings. The Phillip Island victory was a crushing, dominant one. Was second in Valencia as well. Just overall, it was a year where Raul Fernandez very quietly went to work and then just started racking up results. For Trackhouse, left, right, and centre, he became the leader of that team. Like, Davide Brivio could have easily let him walk for Miguel Oliveira when he was there at Trackhouse last year. But Raul was given a chance by Davide, and he's taken that chance and rolled with it. And he's now a top 10 rider on the grid. And this is the Raul that people believed after being the best Moto2 rookie of all time. This is what people were hoping for, because Agura was fine start of the year, got hurt,
very unlucky. Got a very unlucky disqualification due to a software version on his bike not being correct, which did cost him some points. That I want to know, like, that injury mid-season happened, broken leg, and he just. He was very quiet after that. He wasn't bad, but he was very quiet.
You don't sign a rookie to come 16th in the long run. No. So we'll see what year 2 does. The upside is there, but it's got to be shown off in places more than Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think you're being very generous in the chat there, Raptor. I'll say that much. But the only concern I have with Aprilia is how much of this is fool's gold. Because Bez was at his absolute. Because Bez was at his best when Marquez wasn't here, and that's my concern.
Wonder who was responsible for that.
Well, Bez, funnily enough, but
and that's the thing. Like, forget Marc, who we will get to. Believe me, listeners and viewers. Alex Marquez still would have won this championship with margin over Marco Bezzecchi. And that is with Alex going missing in the middle of the year. Aprilia has a very good bike. In terms of its fundamentals, it is a very good motorcycle. You would hope they would have that, given that they only just got out of bottom concessions themselves recently. The concession system does work. We've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Ducati had a down year and still utterly carpet bombed them in every championship standing available.
Yeah.
Aprilia, like, if Aprilia had a good year this year, and it was, best year that they've ever had in top flight motorsport, what does a year need to look like from them where they actually can challenge Ducati? Because they, in my book, you have to have more riders up the front. You have to at least double your win total. Probably more.
Yeah.
And you need to be better on the kinds of tracks that where Aprilia, their ceiling is probably as high as Ducati now. Their floor is a hell of a lot lower. Because when Ducati had a bad day this year, they still probably had 3 bikes in the top 5. When Aprilia had a bad day this year, it was probably bottom half of top 10.
Can I say that I don't know what that better year looks like until I see a healthy Jorge Martin for a full season, or at least 5/6 of a year, man?
Yeah.
I'm going to be real about Jorge Martin. If Bez is this good, you don't need him.
That's also a fair point.
And I think that Bez is a hell of a lot less baggage. Because Martin got hurt in his first thought was, I'm out. I want out. Get me out of this team.
I was going to say, is Bez, especially given how much Aprilia loves him, and from the reactions and the celebrations they've had, Bez might now be the spiritual leader of this team and not the guy they signed as world champion.
So now you've just signed an Albatross contract then.
They didn't know that when they signed it.
We didn't know what Martin was going to be, and that we still don't know what Jorge Martin truly is on an Aprilia yet, because he's not really been 100% healthy for more than maybe 3 rounds all year. I was like, the question is, how do they truly compare with Marquez? I would say I'm inclined to agree with Cam. If they can turn 4 wins into 7 or 8, and they can have like 8 or 9 weekends where they're like Misano, where they're right there with Marc, I'd be like, okay, this is legit. We have a contender. I'm still a little bit on the fence about Aprilia. The upside is clearly there. They can legitimately win races and beat the best of Ducati on merit. Now they need to put the whole infrastructure together, get some depth in their rider roster. Raul Fernandez is a very good number 2 you could potentially have, but he needs to be a bit higher than 10th next year if we're talking about serious progress. And the big question mark is, where does Jorge Martin fit in this fold once fully healthy? Because we saw Bannerton. Bannerton was proof that when he's on it, he was exceptional. One of the rides of the season. But is that going to be him every week? I don't know. None of us do.
My other question about Aprilia is going back to this motorcycle. Because we have seen the 2026 RSGP, and it is not subtle.
No.
They are dumping the whole clip into the last year of the big aero ride height device regulations.
Yep.
I just worry because they took a big swing at the bike. They had a really good bike in 2022. And then they took a big swing at it. And it was the wrong swing. Ducati, for better and for worse, and we're about to get into that for probably another 3 hours on this podcast, have generally been a little more subtle with how they have changed the bike. We have seen something new on the Ducati. I'm sure Pecco won't be using it next year because he can only use parts from 2024. But when Marc is healthy and he gets back on the bike for next year, what does he validate to bring into the GP26? Do Aprilia take a step forward? Because one of 2 things is going to happen with this big update on the Aprilia. Either it's going to work great, or it's not going to work great. You don't change the bike that much for no effect.
It's not going to help that their leg wings might get banned before next season starts. There's another story that's kind of gone under the radar a little bit. The leg wings they have on the back of the bike might get chucked out. Potentially on Dorna veto on safety grounds. Now, to quickly explain for those who don't know, normally in MotoGP, you cannot change the technical regulations unless it's a unanimous agreement between all 5 manufacturers. Aprilia brought in these big leg wings on the rear sides of their bike. They do exactly what you think they do. Add downforce to the rear, extra grip.
Which was their big breakthrough this year, was fixing the rear of the bike.
Yes, and Honda used a similar concept later on in the season once Aprilia started using theirs. The problem with them is that they're designed to break off if you have a crash, and sometimes they didn't. It happened to Bez when he got crashed out by Aldeguer. I think it was Jerez in the sprint. His leg got trapped under one of the leg wings. Not ideal. Genuine safety risk. Could be a problem. Now, Aprilia are unlikely to vote for their own leg wing system to end up being banned.
Turkey, Thanksgiving, etc.
Turkey, Thanksgiving, you know the drill. We've seen this before with Formula One and their driver guidelines. However, Dorna does have a veto over the manufacturers if they can ban something on safety grounds. I think this is a bit of a nudge, nudge, wink, wink to say...
Take them off before we take them off.
Yes. The story is apparently they're going to negotiate a compromise and just toss them for 2027 once the new regulations start.
The DAS clause.
Yes, you can have this for one more year, then we're going to ban it. That's where this is going. So again, Aprilia, like you say, Cam, are throwing the house at this. There's no doubt about that. We'll see what happens, but they need to take this step and times it by 2 is what I would say. Maybe Martin will help with that once he's fully healthy, what he brings to the table. Raul Fernandez is an excellent rear gunner to have. Hopefully Iagura kicks on from this year. There's a lot of potential in this Aprilia camp, but unfortunately they make memes out of potential men, so we'll see how this goes next year.
Give me fire, give me freedom, give me an improvement of over 200 points, or I retire or something like that. Now onto the big stuff. Ducati, championship winning manufacturer, 768 points, tier A, of course. I mean, what is there to say?
I'm just going to crib this directly from Dre's season review on the website. My goodness, what a down year for Bologna. Last year, they scored 97.5% of all points available. They dropped down to 94. Man, they're cooked. Put them in rice.
Only the BR46 bikes didn't win a race this year. That's Fabio Di Giannantonio, who was still 6th in the standings, and Franco Morbidelli, who was still 7th in the standings. Somehow, despite every other report of Franco Morbidelli's weekend being that he has had the worst weekend of his career to date. Firmin Aldeguer got his first Grand Prix win and was Rookie of the Year handily. Alex Marquez, the other Gresini rider, was championship runner-up.
Our bikes.
Our bikes. Francesco Bagnaia was 5th in points with 2 Grand Prix wins, 2 sprint wins. And, of course, Marc Marquez with 11 wins, 14 sprint wins, 8 pole positions, 15 podiums, 16 sprint podiums, and 18 weekends. And, of course, 2025 Formula One. 2025 MotoGP World Champion.
Damn, McLaren did blow that lead. Son of a bitch.
I mean, Mark and Alex. What a great season. It shouldn't feel this messy, though.
Ducati were completely and utterly dominant in every sense of the word. And yet, that they were also incredibly messy everywhere behind the scenes. The 3 best manufacturers, actually the 4 best. Let's say every manufacturer in MotoGP is a messy bitch.
Mm-hmm. It's a messy ass sport. I mean, this again, if you looked purely at the results, you would say, "Oh, it's been an outstanding Ducati season again, completely dominant." Everywhere where it counted and mattered, they were them. Easy championship win. Yet internally, you could make a genuine argument that the GP25 was a bust. Like it was a bike that was salvaged to a degree by Marc Marquez. For those who don't know,
this one before.
Yeah, it's not the first time we've heard this. I mean, going all the way back to preseason testing. their original GP25 engine was thrown out because both their factory riders did not like it. It was especially Pecco.
Couldn't quite get the bike stopped into turns using it.
Yeah, it was a bit quicker, a bit more explosive, but it also hurt their corner entry. And Bagnaia in particular did not like that. So it was put on the shelf, and they used basically a Frankenstein's monster of 25 and 24 parts to be their eventual MotoGP package. And, well, it was hard not to see when it was the Marquez brothers on two different bikes that essentially were fighting for wins between Marc and Alex, that some people were genuinely sitting there and going, is the 24 still better? Because Alex all of a sudden has turned itself into a genuine title contender? So, if this is Alex's first year on a 24, then he must be good. Or the bike must be great then, because he wasn't this last year. So, of course, it led to this huge debate about which Ducati was more effective. We've been here before with Ducati and their factory setups, after all. And, yeah, it boiled down to effectively Pecco Bagnaia as well, and his entire season being derailed on the GP25. That ended up being one of the biggest stories of the year, where weekend to weekend, we did not know if this bike was going to perform or not. It wasn't so bad at the start of the year. Start of the year was relatively fine. Not winning or anything, apart from the gift he got in Austin, but he was still competitive on the podium more often than not, and close enough where it's like, okay, not a huge deal, but Marc is beating him every weekend. After the summer break, it got worse. Far worse.
Implosion.
Pick up the slack, Cam, if you want.
Yeah. With Pecco, it went from, usually being competitive enough, podiums, top fives, what you would the bare minimum you would expect, to suddenly he was qualifying poorly, and he was crashing, and he started qualifying worse, and he started crashing more. And all the while, they are throwing the house at this bike every week, and seemingly he just could not get a baseline for it. In the meantime, how many points did Marc Marquez score out of 185 in that stretch?
Let me carry the one here. 185, yeah. All of them.
Well, that's concerning.
Yeah. And this would fuel on for the entire back half of the season, where Bagnaia's results got worse and worse. He closed out the year with DNFs in 6 out of the final 7 Grand Prix. Not all of them were his fault. In all fairness, he was completely wiped out by Johan Zarco in Valencia. He was very unlucky to get a rear puncher in Sepang from a piece of carbon fiber that wasn't cleaned up from the hellacious Jose Antonio Rueda Noah Detweiler crash before the Moto3 race had even started. He was running third in that race comfortably, and unfortunately, just sheer bad luck that punctured his tyre. But outside of the double Grand Slam victory he had in Motegi, which was allegedly the big breakthrough weekend, we'll talk about that in a minute, he DNF'd in all of the other final 7 Grand Prix. In fact, when Marc Marquez was out, the factory team only scored 20 points in their final 4 Grand Prix weekends.
Yeah, because their reserve rider is an octogenarian, and then they decided, oh yeah, we can actually put Nicola Bulliga on the right and finally make some progress when we don't have one of our regular riders on the bike.
Yeah,
he was
more or
fine
less
in his very short time with MotoGP. Actively pretty decent.
Yeah.
That's the Pecco. We've talked about him before as the Goldilocks rider. Everything needs to be just right. I also go back to a point I made earlier this year around him and the fight that he and Martin had last year. That he and Martin are really not so different in terms of riding style. And Pramac and factory Ducati Both had the exact same motorcycles, and thus pooled all their data together. And those two could hone setups off of one another. Marc Marquez is not that. Marc Marquez is more akin to a man having a fist fight with a motorcycle as opposed to actually riding it.
Blunt force trauma.
Yes. It grabs onto the handlebars, so motorcycle, this is what's about to happen. Deal with it. Pretty much every corner. His data is useless. For everyone but him. As Cal Crutchlow once famously said, I understand what he's doing, I just can't do it.
Yeah, right.
Pecco had no one to help him with setups this year but himself, on a bike that, due to changes made in it, had a little less front-end feeling than in the past. And who is better at communicating with the front end and traumatizing it into doing what he needs it to do than Marc Marquez? And it feels like he lost his baseline and just chased his tail for the rest of the year. It never got any better.
And the worst part was there were so many teases that they might have figured it out. In Aragon's test, it was using 355mm brake discs, the biggest that Brembo supplied, which they couldn't even use for half those races because half of them don't have heavy braking zones.
They're too powerful. You can't get hot.
Yeah, exactly. So half of them you couldn't even use. There was Barberton where he was a bit good in the Grand Prix, and there was we shifted the entire rear of the bike back 3 centimeters. That didn't work. It was.
He could get a mini breakthrough, and then he would put him on track the next week with the same setup, and it would be nowhere.
Yeah, and it was all just so confusing to the point where. It's quite a funny story now because Matt Oxley, one of the best MotoGP journalists in the business, finally got an off-the-record sit-down with Luigi Dell'Igna to explain it's the ride height device. The 2025 ride height device wasn't working because, again, lack of front-end feeling, and it was affecting Bagnaya's riding. We went back to the one from last year. That one worked. And as a direct result, we fixed it in Motegi, but we've not figured it out since then. Matt Oxley dropped an article last week basically saying, I never believed them.
Yeah, they're lying.
Because basically his theory was there's no way Ducati could be that incompetent that they would wait 16 rounds to change a rear ride height device.
So then what really is going on?
The one thing that they can't change, which would be their engine. And the way they described it to Ox is that the only real differences between the 24 and the 25 engine, from what actually ended up in the 25, are just mainly durability adjustments, just reliability fixes. The classic reliability fixes from F1 that you're allowed to do in an engine freeze.
Mm-hmm.
But he believes that is the issue that they are having, because that's the one thing you cannot change. Once you homologate your crankcases, that's it. That's all you can change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so and part of the reason Oxy didn't believe them was because they felt Ducati was so bad at handling the drama to the point where they were pulling Pecco Bagnaia from media commitments, and essentially Bagnaia admitted to the press, I'm saying to you what they want me to tell you. As he put in his article, rule number 1 of PR, never create a vacuum of information. Because you got people believing there was a genuine conspiracy that you were out to ruin Pecco for the sake of Marquez. And that was just, that, of course, we all know that's bullshit. But you openly invited people to speculate because you were basically lying to the press and kicking that can down the road, talking about their problems. And then they were lying to the media, allegedly, about what these problems were. Again, to all try and protect Pecco's extremely polite Italian soul. It was all an incredibly messy situation, and Bagnaia's season was ultimately a whopping disappointment. Not truly terrible, but just very disappointing.
Yeah, it's really... Second half was truly terrible. First half was just what I expected.
When you look at the totality of the picture, a lot of riders would kill to have this stat line, but a lot of riders didn't win back-to-back MotoGP world titles and probably were a little bit hard done that they didn't win 3 in a row.
Right. This was meant, one of us picked him to win the title this year, and for understandable... One of those were for understandable reasons. He knew the setup, he knew the camp, and we didn't know what Marc was going to be.
Also, I didn't want to be boring.
That's always... It's an entertainment product, after all. No, so when you look at it and you just go, what a mess. And that was what this season was for Ducati, but they got away with it because Marc was so good. To talk about some of the other elements around Ducati this year, VR46 was kind of there, but they didn't actually win a race this year. Fabio, I thought, was actually quite underrated. I think he was very quietly effective this year. 6th in points, 4 podiums, was the 3rd best sprinter in the field on average finish, believe it or not. That surprised me when we looked at the numbers. I was like, oh, Fabio was a really good sprinter this year. Good for him.
Good step forward. Good step forward for him. He's just hanging at the front.
Morbidelli, pace-wise this year, a lot better. Everything else, bro.
Stop fighting people.
Some of the most boneheaded shit you'll ever see done on a motorcycle, and I've played Road Rash 3D for the PlayStation.
Oh dear.
You could sum up his whole season. He had a pretty good qualifying in Valencia, pretty good weekend up to that point, rides up and crashes into the back of Aleix Espargaro on the test Honda, on the formation of the grid, and breaks his own hand.
Twice he got blocking penalties in qualifying for disrupting other riders' laps, and he got a long lap penalty in Mugello for completely wiping out Maverick Vinales like he wasn't even there. Morbidelli was a messy motherfucker on track as well as off track this year with Ducati, and he was arguably on the better bike because Di Antonio was in a very similar camp to Bagnaia, where he didn't like the front end feeling of the motorcycle, but it wasn't a season derailer like it was with Pecco. And Di Antonio only ended up 26 points behind Bagnaia in the championship this year.
Mm-hmm. I think that is probably the more damning indictment of Pecco's season, in that, forget second Ducati. He was kind of lucky to be third Ducati.
At times, yeah.
And on the same motorcycle... we know the GP25, while still fast, was a flawed device. But if he had ended up third on that motorcycle, then you ask much greater questions of him. And he was not far off. And to that effect as well, there was a point where they did have him test one of the GP24s, was comfortable on it. Mm-hmm. Cribbed everything over to that, won Motegi, and then won nothing else for the remainder of the year.
Yeah.
Gresini,
though. I mean, Alex Marquez, championship runner-up. Our bikes.
Our bikes.
Season.
Well,
Fermin Aldeguer was Rookie of the Year, too. And he got that first win.
Let me tell you, Fermin Aldeguer was as advertised. This kid,
very solid.
He doesn't know enough to be afraid was the tagline for him for much of the year. I mean, extraordinary breakneck speed. Kept it fairly clean most of the season. Not a lot of big rider errors. And he was throwing that bike into corners in Le Mans in the rain with reckless abandon and making it work. That was the race. That was the race where I'm like, okay, this kid's as good as advertised, and it really only got better from there. In the absence of some of our protagonists, takes his first win. I'm sure Pedro Acosta is absolutely punching air.
Yep, no doubt about it. That again, Fermin Aldeguer has a Grand Prix win. Pedro Acosta doesn't. And you could make a case with Furman that the only reason he won that Grand Prix was because Bez wasn't around after the first 30 seconds. But a win's a win, right? You can't take that away from him.
You got to be who they put in front of you. And Frankie Carchecki, once again, the bike whisperer, one of the best in MotoGP.
The fourth different MotoGP rider that Frankie Carchecki has won a MotoGP race with, and ever since Nadia Padovani took over this team in 2021 after the tragic passing of her husband Fausto, every MotoGP rider that has raced for this team has won at least once.
I'm sure wherever Fausto is, he is very happy and is not shutting up at all about it.
Marc Marquez was on my motorcycle last year, and his brother's great too.
Like this, when they're not posting dumb shit on social media, they're usually posting good shit on social media. And they are the drunkest, most fun MotoGP team, without fail.
And despite all of that, they had a World Championship runner-up for the first time in 20 years. The last time they had a championship runner-up in MotoGP, Marco Melandri, back in 2005. Remember him?
Yeah, I forgot that happened a bit.
Yeah.
I would have guessed that was Gibber now.
Nope. No, because he was...
He was toughed out by them.
Yeah.
Too many injuries.
He was... This team was really fun. And that's before we get to Alex Marquez, who was just iron-willed consistency across most of this season.
Quick, iron-willed, but does he praise his brother as hard as anybody else on this grid?
Shut the fuck up, Van Man.
As someone who made it a point to destroy every time trial my brother put forth in Mario Kart, the younger brother always wants to destroy the older brother.
Yeah, as an older brother to a boy myself, yeah, very much so.
The older brother to an Alex Marquez fan.
Exactly. Brother Ryan was beaming with delight with the way this season played out, and rightly so, a model of consistency. I'll put it to you this way. We had 44 races in 2025. Alex Marquez was second or better in 25 of them, which is incredible. It's an incredible run of consistency. He may have even won this championship if it wasn't for that rough patch in the middle. And I say that sincerely, butterfly effect and all of that. If he didn't have that horrible crash at Assen that broke a metacarpal in his hand, maybe he steals the title if all things end up being equal afterwards. He was that good. That middle of the year derailment, Assen, Germany to a degree, Brno was the real bad one. 0 points coming out of that entire weekend. That was the real disaster weekend that scuppered him a little bit. It was completely anonymous in Balaton as well. But
dumped it at Le Mans, which is really what started opening up that championship for Marc.
He was 24 points behind when Marquez's 15-race win streak started. By the time it got to an end in Catalonia, which was broken by Alex winning that Grand Prix, it was 182. Yeah, and that was the difference this year.
Yeah. Rough patch in the middle, bookended with just being unable to finish lower than second for most of the rest of the year. Had an okay year last year, but obviously we all know where the shine was last year with Gresini. You put him on the GP24, immediate title contender, immediate just fighting for wins every weekend.
Yeah. You couldn't have asked for much more than Alex Marquez and what he was able to give you. He was the perennial thorn in his brother's side for most of this season, and just kept having good weekend after good weekend after good weekend. Given this was a fringe top 10 guy in his MotoGP career at best until this past season, a hellacious improvement. He is now a bona fide title contender, one of the best riders in the world, and he will be on a GP26 as a factory-supported rider in 2026. And he's earned it. And honestly, if Pecco Bagnaya's bad form continues, the temptation to put both Marquez brothers in the same camp is going to be huge.
Well, I wonder what Honda has to think about this.
Yeah, it's not like Ducati would just immediately about face on the decision that they've made before rubber has even met tarmac, would they?
No. Maybe Magello by then, though.
Oh, Alberto. Yeah. Feels like we're forgetting someone.
Marc Marquez. Well, that went well.
And that's the show. Places you can find us real quick.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah. Let's keep this short and sweet. You put the best motorcycle rider in the world on maybe not the easiest to ride, but the fastest motorcycle in the world. What did you think was going to happen?
Remember when I said that I didn't want to be boring and picking Marc Marquez for the title?
You should have been boring.
Marc Marquez is not boring when he rides a motorcycle, dog. He wasn't boring when he was at his peak at Repsol Honda, even when he was winning everything, and he wasn't boring at Ducati Corsa.
The opening round, he dominates. He has to give up the lead by choice because he has a tire pressure warning. Gets the tire back under control, passes his brother, and fucks off into the distance. That should have set the tone. Actually, I was wrong. What should have set the tone is when he tested the GP24 at the end of last season, went, oh, so that's why I lost this year. This will be fun.
I thought great sports comebacks like this were supposed to have a bit more struggle.
The struggle with the previous
struggle being steak too juicy, lobster too buttery.
The struggle was everything that led up to this point. I understand it, but man, if they make a movie about this, they're really going to have to take some liberties with this script.
You mentioned back pay earlier with Pedro Acosta. Marc Marquez got back pay for whatever the fuck the last 5 years was.
And we are getting a MotoGP movie based on Aspar. Keep an eye on that next year. But yes, I've not talked about it very much. Marc Marquez was, from the very first meaningful session, the man. And he opened the door a little bit, and he made a couple of errant mistakes.
Cute with Dakota.
And it got too cute at Kota, from the fucking rule change on the grid to tuck in the front when he didn't need to. Ref was a bit ropey. After that, completely dominant. When he was fully dialed in and he didn't have any shenanigans, he won. It was as simple as that. He won 11 out of 18 this year. He wasn't a particularly great qualifier, but still had 8 pole positions, more than anybody else in the field. 15. If you take DNFs out of the equation, his average finishing Grand Prix this year was 2. And there was a 12th in there from Jerez. 2!
Well, that sounds pretty good. It couldn't have been better in the sprint, though, could it?
Take that down to 1.7.
That's pretty good at it.
Marc
Marquez,
terrifying.
Here's the problem for Aprilia and everyone else. You got to go through that guy. And sometimes that guy goes through that guy, and that's the problem with Marc Marquez in the modern age.
He is still... Yeah, he's still the best rider in the world. I think this 9th World Championship cements him as the greatest to ever do it, quite frankly. And it seals one of the greatest comeback stories in all of sports. To be able to come back, completely destroy this field, win the championship 4 rounds early at Motegi, and do it in style, in the style of more than a number. This meant something. This was a transcendent moment for MotoGP. That the greatest to ever do it came back and reclaimed his throne. And he did it in such dominant fashion to the point where he could take 4 weekends off at the end due to injury, and he was still 75 points better than the field.
78.
It's ridiculous. 78. Ridiculous.
Yeah. He was the force to which there was no immovable object. It was David Emmett might have actually undersold when he said, "Oh, you thought 2019 was bad? You haven't seen nothing yet."
Yeah.
It got to the point in the middle of the year when we had actual accredited MotoGP journalists saying that Alex Marquez isn't racing Marc as hard as he could be.
Who else would have been racing him harder at this stage with the equipment that they had?
We had conspiracy theories up and down about Marc sabotaging the development of the bike like he must have done at Honda when he didn't develop this motorcycle. All of it just washed away.
Marc Marquez could have taken those last few rounds off by choice. By choice. And he'd have been fine. The only difference was he can't go and reach for the dip in his chips with his bad shoulder.
Yep, because Marco Bezzecchi panicked, dive-bombed him, and wiped him out in Indonesia, damaged his collarbone, and, well, there was nothing to race for Marc. Could he have come back? Maybe. They didn't bother with surgery initially because they thought it would heal on its own.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Ducati had already clinched everything available to them, despite an off year. And he had already clinched the championship. And, hey, Marc Marquez finally learned his lesson a little bit from 2020, to listen to his body, and if he's hurt, just let it be a little bit.
Yeah, just kick your feet up and relax. You've already done the hard part.
And my favorite thing that I saw all year in all of motorsport, silly shit in Abu Dhabi pending. You said this meant something, Dre. And it did. If you ever want to see how much it meant, just go listen to him on the cooldown lap in Motegi. Blowing his own voice out.
Yeah, he was screaming when he won that championship, because that was what it was all about. That's what he came back for. And he was ultra conservative about trying to win that title. So when it finally did land, that relief almost of hearing the emotions and seeing it all come out when the dream was realized, it was a special, special moment. People debate, the nature of contrived celebrations in motorsport these days, but that one was special. That one felt different. That felt like 5 years of pain and suffering finally coming to an end. And yeah, it was a truly special, iconic moment for MotoGP, and I don't think people are going to forget that one in a hurry.
It felt like the end point of that clip from the documentary with him with the Honda executives pointing to the, half a foot long scar in his arm and going, "This wasn't for pleasure. This was to win." Well, he did.
The proof was in the pudding, and it was proof that it was all worth it. That's Ducati for you. They've got a lot of thinking about 2026 to do, and the future could be very interesting, but they are still the dominant force in bike racing for their fourth consecutive year, really. And let's see what the future holds for them.
Thoughts on 2025, gentlemen?
Death taxes Marc Marquez. Took a few years off, but eventually it came back.
The chase for 10. The chase to be potentially an 8-time MotoGP world champion. You know how much Dorna likes the whole, separation of church and state after all, right?
Well, not just that as well. Ducati are fighting to be the ultimate and final victors of this iteration of MotoGP, the 1000cc era, which began, defined, controlled by the Japanese in Honda and Yamaha. And Ducati broke that control and took it themselves. They now go into the final year of these rules up against an Aprilia who have emptied the tank to usurp them and look to retain their crown one final time going into a hard reset of the sport.
And I think the next 3 years of MotoGP could define them going forward. I mean, there's a lot of this I've not even talked about yet. We haven't talked about the juniors, to a degree. Diego Moreira was a great champion. Moto3 was a very emotional year for good and bad reasons, Jose Antonio Reda was brilliant this year. Was a worthy world champion, a 10-win champion, one of the best Moto3 seasons ever. He nearly died on a racetrack. Had a huge cardiac arrest alongside Noah Detweiler in that horrific incident. We are still 2 years away from a regulation reset on Moto3. And that was two of another, like Luca Lanetta got run over and broke a leg. David Munoz had an enormous high side and broke a leg. It was a horrible year for Moto3 when it came to injuries. And we were very lucky that no one became a statistic in that sense. Liberty Media now owns this sport. What are they going to do with MotoGP going forward? We've only seen the tip of their influence so far, really. They still potentially have got so much more they can do. We start to see the first shifts in that pattern, the pre-race ceremony. I think a lot of Dorna's shit was already in place before Liberty got there. The reduction in TV time for Moto 2 and 3, the moving around of the paddock, the focusing on MotoGP as the premier class, the Hall of Fame that came into play this year, and the fact that the junior categories were exempt from that because they kind of admitted they overcooked their own Hall of Fame to a degree. It's a messy bitch. I've said that a lot on this podcast, but that's what it is. Moto3's 2 years away from a rebrand. We don't know what Liberty's going to do. They need to get the sport into new places, new sponsors, try to get new fans on board. They can't just copy Formula One's playbook the whole way around because that's not going to work on two wheels. I can assure you of that. And of course, what are these 2027 regulations going to bring? MotoGP for years was the hang your hat best series in motorsport for entertainment. It is not that anymore. A lot of these races were boring.
These bikes can't race. And yet another, in a year where some of those front-running bikes didn't really change all that much, they could not race. We had, 4 or 5 tire pressure incidents across the year because of the state of the tires, which are still not fit for purpose, which got canceled for next year, so we get to keep the same shitty, not fit for purpose tires for one more season.
Exactly. It's not been great to deal with or see that come out in real time in terms of the regulations. We're in limbo essentially with that. We don't know what these. I'm optimistic for these new regulations. I mean, the Aprilia said there's going to be 30 to 50% less downforce. That's promising. In theory, that should open things up a little bit more, hopefully.
No more rear ride height device. Rest in piss, bozo. Get these fucking things off these bikes, because, I mean, the number of failures, I feel like, went up hard this year.
They did. The number of failures, the number of, I'd say, middle-level, medium-level injuries. Broken collarbones, broken wrists, broken legs, broken bones in general. There was a lot of those this year. Like, half the riders I had to write about in my season review, I had to put a bracket that they missed time at a certain point. Only 3 occasions the entire season did we get a fully healthy grid from the original 22 we had at the start of the year. I think only 3 times all year did we have a fully healthy grid, which that wasn't until I want to say Mandalika or something like that, where we had the whole grid healthy at once, or Motegi or something like that. I think it was only the first time we had the full complement of riders on the grid. It
was Motegi, and then Martin put an end to that immediately at turn 1.
Yeah, it was like 2023, where we didn't have a fully healthy grid for the whole year. but the sport wants to expand. It's thinking about trying to get to a 25 race calendar in the future, which is just ridiculous in my opinion. You're gonna kill people. I'm not even exaggerating. We're already at breaking points at 44. Once you factor in the sprints, we can't get much. We're already at breaking point with MotoGP. If you get to 25, you're either going to have to bring in triple headers permanently, or you're going to be racing in December. Either or.
Well, and there's a very good reason why the journalists there are journalists screaming at the riders, start a union. Stop some of this shit.
And part of the reason is as well because they know their asses are in a sling because they can't afford to cover the sport in the paddock for the whole season the way this is going. Mm-hmm. I know the freelancers, the Oxleys, the Emmets, the Pattersons of the world. Their costs are rising to cover this championship year on year. It gets worse and worse every year. And we're going to Brazil next year. That's going to cost a pretty penny to get down there, etc., etc. It's going to keep on going. These are the next 3 years, in my opinion, I think are going to be three of maybe the most important years in MotoGP's history. It's a new era. It's a new ownership structure. They're in F1's back pocket in terms of a series they can co-promote with. They now need to figure out how to grow this sucker. Because Marc Marquez is not going to be around forever, and I don't know where the next superstar comes from after him. There's no guarantee we warm to Pedro Acosta in the same way 5 or 6 years later. Marquez is 33 in February. That's already on the high end for a MotoGP rider. You see, there's a lot of shit to think about with this sport and a lot of moving parts that by 2027, 2028, we're going to have a much better feeling on whether this is good or not. So I think it's a very important time for MotoGP going forward. And I think the next 3 years are going to be very interesting. I think that'll just about do it.
Yeah. Ranting about bikes for 2 hours now, more than 2 hours.
Just under by the time the cuts come through. Yeah, that was it for MotoGP in 2025. I just want to say a thank you to everyone that's listened in. Hopefully enjoyed the shows over the course of the last year. We've had a lot of fun putting them together and having our own stories to talk about as well as the action on the track. Big thanks to some of the journalists we cover and follow this sport, to David Emmett, to Matt Oxley, to Simon Patterson, to Val Koronevsky. They do fantastic work in the paddock, and they're part of the reason we can do it at the level we do it at, because we learn from them and they're great at it. And it was fun as ever to cover, despite the fact that it was a little bit headache-inducing at times. So from RJ O'Connell, Cameron Buckley, and me, Dre Harrison, we'll see you back for the Haters Guide in February. And we're back for the Formula One season finale next week from Abu Dhabi. What's the worst that can happen there, after all? Sayonara.